Hello guys, welcome to another video, and in this video we will be implementing search functionality. So we are going to fetch data from the movie database and render on our screen using Redux, and we will be implementing this search functionality. So for the styling, we will be using TailwindCss. So we would use TailwindCss to implement responsive styling, and also for the theming. So I'll show us how to implement dark and white theme in our application. So without wasting much time guys, let's get started with the tutorial. Okay guys, so now for us to get started, I'm going to cd into my desktop directory, and I'm going to run the command npx create react app. I'm going to give it a name of movie app YouTube, and I'm going to go with a template of TypeScript. So this is a command to run, and while that's going on, let me walk us through the different tech stacks that we'll be using in this project. So getting started, we'll be using TailwindCss. So TailwindCss gives us some class names that we can use and style our different components, our different pages. And I'll show you how to set up TailwindCss and how to configure TailwindCss in your React project. And we'll also be using TailwindCss for our theming feature. So we'll be implementing that. And apart from TailwindCss, we'll also be using Redux toolkit. So we need to manage state in our React application. And I'm going to show you how we can configure a Redux store, how we can set up different slices for different states for our application, and how we can read off data from our Redux store. So I'm going to show us that, and we'll also be using the movie database. So the movie database gives us an API where we can fetch data about some movies. So we'll be able to fetch some information like the movie name, so description, images, and stuff like that. So in case you're not able to use the movie database for some reason, I would advise in this case you just go on with any API of your choice. So to set up the movie database, you would come to this website, set up your profile, and you would have access to an API key that we would be using to authenticate ourselves to this database. So in case you can use the movie database, go on and use API any API of your choice. It doesn't mean, in this case, it's just a GET request to fetch some data from some API and display on our screen. So with that said, let's go back to the terminal and see if we are done with creating our new project. Yes, so I'm going to clear and I'll cd into the created project, and I'm going to open it with Visual Studio Code using the code.command command. So now we're in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to take off some boilerplates that we would not need. So I'll remove the testing, the logo, the React app env, and some other files here. So I'll send them to trash. And going into the app.tsx, I'll clean up the React import and the logo import, delete the header declaration, and just go with the text of hello world. Okay, and I would also go into the index.tsx file and also clean up the imports and the one at the bottom over there. So with this done, let's open our terminal. So I'm going to use Ctrl-tilde to open the terminal, and I'm going to run npm start to start up our development server in watch mode on localhost 3000. So it gives us a server that we can watch our application for changes, and we see hello world on the screen. So let's get started and install TailwindCss in our project. So the first thing we are going to do is to install as a dev dependency TailwindCss. So we install TailwindCss, PostCSS, and also auto prefixer. So you can copy this command, go back to Visual Studio Code. I'll shut down the terminal and I'll paste it. So while that's going on, so we're going to copy this command npx tailwindcss init -p, and I'll go back to Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to paste this command in the terminal. So also come back, and next thing I'll copy the contents and replace that in our tailwindconfig.js. And going back to TailwindCSS, I'm going to copy the directives and would add them in our index.css file. So with this, we should have TailwindCSS installed, and I'm going to run npm start. And while that's going on, let's go over to the app.tsx. So let's go over to the app.tsx, and I'm going to give this text a red color, so text red 900. And let's see, yes, we see the text has a color of red. So next, we need to configure Redux in our application. So in setting up Redux, we'll go over to the Redux toolkit documentation, and here we need to install the dependencies. So npm install would need Redux.js toolkit and also React Redux. So we can copy the command, go over to our terminal, and install the dependencies. So while that is going on, we can come over to the root directory and create a folder. A file we'll call store.ts. And in order for us to create a store, we need to import configure store from Redux toolkit package that we just installed. So from @redux.js/toolkit. Now we'll initialize the store in a constant. So export const store is going to be equal to configure store. And configure store needs an object, so we'll give it a reducer, and for now we'll just pass an empty object. So this would be the initial state of our application, an empty object. And let's go on and set the types. So we'll set the type for our root state, which is going to be equal to a return type. The return type of going to return the type of our store.getState. So it's going to be the return type that is coming from our store. And let's also export another type, which we'll call app_dispatch. So app_dispatch is going to be equal to the type of our store.dispatch. So now we have these types that we can use and configure our store. So coming to our index.tsx, we need to provide this store to our entire application, and we do that by wrapping our app with the provider. And let's import provider as well. So we'll need to import provider from @React Redux. So we'll need to pass a store, which will be equal to store, and this store will be coming from the store file that we just created. So we'll import store from store. So with this, we are going to restart our application, and we should have Redux configured in our application with an initial state of an empty object, because we don't have any state right now in our reducer. So if we check the Redux toolkit, we just have an empty object for our state. So going back to our IDE, let's set up the first state of our application. So I'm going to create a folder called hooks. Let's set up our hooks first, and inside the hooks, I'm going to set up a file called store. So storehook.ts, and inside this file, let's import useDispatch and also useSelector from, so we'll import it from React Redux. Okay, and also we need to import a type, so we need to import type, and that type is going to be coming from also React Redux, and the type we would need to import is our type useSelector hook. Okay, so now let's create our custom hook. The first hook we'll create would be for our useAppSelector hook, for useAppDispatch, and this is going to be type a function that is going to return the app dispatch that we defined in our store. Okay, so this is going to be the type, and it's going to be equal to useDispatch. And we can also export our useAppSelector So useAppSelector is also going to have the type of our type useSelector hook, which is a generic type, and will pass our root state that we also defined in our store. And we'll initialize it to the useSelector. Okay. So now we have these hooks defined, and we'll be using this hook to be able to access our state and also dispatch actions later on in our application. So let's set up the different states of our application. I'll create a file that I'll call features. So we're going to have our theming feature, and also would have our movie feature, and they would have different application states. In our feature, I'm going to create a folder first off for the theming. So I'm going to call this theme, and inside the theme we'll create a theme slice.ts file. And let's go on to define the theme slice or the theme state of our application, and we create a slice by importing createSlice from @redux.js/toolkit. And let's first of all we'll export a const called theme slice, which is going to be equal to the createSlice method function that we just imported. And to configure it, we have to give it a name, and we'll just call this theme. Also, we would give it an initial state. So let's define an initial state for our theme. So we'll define a constant called initial state, and this initial state is going to be equal to false. So initially our dark theme is going to be equal to false. And let's create an interface, so a type for our initial state. So we'll call this theme state, and it's going to be equal to a boolean, so true or false. And then we're going to say this is going to be of type theme state. And next, for our reducers, which is going to be an object, we are going to have an action which we would call toggle theme. Okay, so this toggle theme is going to be called for us with our state, and here we need to return something. So we are going to return our state, which is now going to be equal to the inverse of the state. So if our state is true, it becomes false whenever the toggle theme action is called. So if we had false and we dispatch the action, is going to inverse it to true. So let's go on and export our action. So we are going to destructure our action from our theme slice.actions, and the action we have is toggle theme. Okay, and also let's export the slice reducer. So we're going to export default, and we'll call this theme slice reducer, and this is going to be our reducer. So we have our theme slice setup, our state. Next, let's go into our store, and inside our reducer, which initially is an empty object, we're going to have a dark theme property, and the value is going to be our theme reducer, which we just defined. So we'll need to import our theme reducer so we'll go up one level into our features and into our theme and our theme slice. So going back to our browser, and if we check extension, we now have dark theme, which is false. So we have set up our state. Next we are going to do is to be able to set up our components. So let's build up our header components where we can toggle our theme. So in our components, I'm going to create a folder which I would call header, and in the header folder I'm going to create a header.tsx file, and let's go on to define the JSX for our header component. Okay, so I'll say const header is going to be equal to an arrow function, and in here we need to return JSX. So I'm going to return a header element, and I'm going to give this some class names. So first I'm going to give it a margin bottom 20 with NB20, a TailwindCss class name, and inside the header we'll have a navigation with a class name of border bottom, and we're also going to give it a border gray color of 200. Okay, and we are also going to give the border an opacity of, let's say, 25. Okay, and a padding Y of 2.5. I would drop a link to these class names in the description. So inside the navigation, we are going to have a div that is going to hold our logo and also our button to toggle the theme. So we are going to give it a class name of flex, and also we are going to give it a flex wrap. We're also going to justify the elements between, and we are also going to display the item center and give it a max, let's say MX auto, and a max width screen of Excel. So inside the div, now we are going to display our header, so our logo, which is going to have a link to nowhere. And let's give it a class name. So we're going to give it a class name of flex, and we're also going to give it item center, and let's have a span. So let's wrap the text into a span, which we are going to give a class name of self-center and also text Excel. So, and let's also add a font semi-bold and a white space no wrap. And inside, we're going to write the text movies. So this is one of the elements, and the other element will be the button. So let's wrap it in a div. And we need some icons. So first off, let's give this div a class name of flex and items of center, and on large screens, so we are going to give order to. Okay, now we need to install our icons, and I'm going to open a new tab, and I'm going to run npm install react icons. So we'll be using react icons to just get some icons. And let me close the terminal. So let's import. I'll go back to the top, and we need to import our icons from react icons /bs. So the first icon we'll need is the bs sun, and also we would be importing bs full fill moon fill. Okay, so inside the div, let's render the icons as elements. So we're going to render bs sun, and also going to render bs fill moon fill, and let's give them some class names. So I'm going to give it a class name of on hover state. We're going to reduce the opacity to 50, and also cursor pointer. So let's save, and let's export default header. So this is our header element component, and let's render it in our app tsx file, and we would import the header and render the header element in our file app. So going back to our browser, okay, so we see our movies, and we also see our two icons on the screen. Obviously, we want to show one icon. So if we check our state, we have the dark theme of false, and we can already use our state to render one of the icons rather than the two set of icons. So I'll just close all that tabs. And now in our header tsx, let's go on to read off the theme state from our store. And in order for us to do that, I'm going to destructure it from useAppSelector. So let's go on to import useAppSelector, which is going to give us the state and would return the state. So we can destructure dark theme, which is the value of our theme state, which is originally false, and we can conditionally render the elements. So we can say if dark theme is true, I'm just going to cut the sun and display it there. And beneath, I can also say if dark theme is false, so I would also cut the bs fill moon and display there. So this is it. And if we go back to the browser, we see only one icon. Okay, so next we need to come back to our IDE and let's toggle our theme with the action that we have already. So I would import useAppDispatch, and say const dispatch is useAppDispatch, and that's the it's coming from our costume book. Okay, so we would need to dispatch the action, and when we dispatch the action, if we check our theme slides, so the toggle theme action, when it's dispatched, is going to inverse the value of our state. So in order for us to dispatch the action, I'm going to add a function. So I'm going to call it onToggle. So const onToggle is going to be equal to arrow function that is going to call dispatch, and then we'll dispatch the toggle theme action. So we have this onToggle, and when we click on the sun, we are going to click, and it's going to be equal to a function that calls the onToggle. Okay, the onToggle function, and the same thing for the moon icon. So once we click, we're going to call this function onToggle. Okay, so let's go back to our browser, and if we click, we can see that the icon changed and we have that theme true. But let's go on and reload our page. So if we reload the page, you see we are not persisting the state, and our theme is being lost. Our theme state is being lost. So let's go back to the IDE, and in order for us to persist the state, we would no longer have code false there. So we would read off the state from local storage. We will say const theme from local storage is going to be equal to, and then we say local storage dot get item. We want to get an item with a key of has to be a string, so with the key of movie theme. So let's see the return type, and if we hover on it, we see that it's going to return a type of string or null. So let's use the double bank operator, and this is going to make sure that we will have boolean. So if we find a property, is going to return true. If not, it's going to return false. Okay, so now we would use this theme from local storage and replace the value that we have as our theme state. Okay, so now what we are going to do next is when we call the action, so the toggle theme action, we're going to check if state. That means if state has the value of true, that means they want to toggle back to false. And what we are going to do at this point in time, we are going to go over to the dark theme. Okay, so we're going to say local storage dot remove item. We're going to remove item with the key of movie theme, or we can call it movies theme. Okay, so now we'll add an else block, and what we are going to do here is if state is now false, we are going to call local storage dot set item. We're going to set an item with the key of movies theme. Okay, so if we toggle, and now it needs a value when we are setting the item, and in this case any value can work. So in this case I'll just go with underscore. So this now sets the value, and when it sets value, it means theme from local storage is going to return true. So because movies theme will be defined, and then our state is going to have a theme of true. Okay, and once we do that, we'll also go on to return the inverse of our state. So with this done, let's go back to the browser and let's toggle. So we see the moon is there, and if we check our extension, it has false. If we reload our page, and you see we still have false there, and even if we toggle the theme, and we still reload the page, it remains true. Nice. So we have been able to persist our theme state in local storage. So let's go back to our IDE, and the next thing we are going to be working on now is to, because we have our theme defined, let's go on to use our selector, get the theme from our state, so from our store, and configure our theming feature. So we're going to use useAppSelector, and we'll get our state. We'll return the state, and we're going to destructure dark theme. Okay, so first I'm going to remove the text red that we had initially, and I'm going to return this to a dynamic expression. So if dark theme is true, we are going to prefix the dark class, otherwise an empty string. Okay, so we're going to save this, and for it to work, we'll go to our Tailwind config, and we're going to add a dark mode of class because we are using class. I think media is the default, but we'll be using class in this state because we are defining it. Okay, so now we have defined that. Let's also add a property. So I would wrap the header in a div. Okay, let me wrap the header inside of a div, and I'm going to style this header. So I'm going to give it a class name. So if we're on dark mode, that means if we have this dark prefix, we are going to give it a background red of 900, which isn't dark, but in this case, we'll go with that. And we're going to give it a text color of white. We're also going to give it a minimum height of 100 VH and a PX of 4. Also on large screens, we are going to give it a PX of 12 and a padding bottom of 20. So let's save, and if we go back to our browser and so we see we can now toggle the theme. So we can click, and we are also persisting the theme state in local storage. So that's done. Let's go back to the IDE, and the next thing we are going to be working on is our next feature, which is going to be our movies feature. So the movie state of our application. So I'm going to create another folder which we will call movies, and inside the movies I'm going to create the movie slice. So the movie slice of our application, and we will get to see the difference because here we have reducers, but in a movie slice, which is going to be an async operation, there will be nothing inside the reducers. Okay, so we're going to define our movie slice.ts file, but then we need to import some things from Redux.js/toolkit. So first we are going to be importing our payload action. We would also need our create slice, and we'll also need createAsyncThunk. And next we define our actions. So the action we are going to call export a const. We would call get movies, which is going to be createAsyncThunk. And this createAsyncThunk is going to need a type prefix, which we will call movies/getMovies. And next it needs a payload creator, which is now going to be an async function. And if this were to be a post request, when calling this function, the first parameter would be the data we want to send to our backend. So in this case, it's a normal get request whenever we call the get movies action. So we would not be using the data, okay, in when this action is being called. And the second argument of this function is going to be the thunk API. So here in this function, we can now discuss with our API. And in order for us to discuss with our API, let's have a try catch block, and we'll have a constant for our response, and we'll be using the fetch API. So we'll await fetch, and in fetch API it needs the URL. So we'll be using the movie database, and in this case we are just going to pass a backtick to be able to type dynamic content, because we also need to pass our API key. So https api.db.org/3/trending/all, and then /day. Okay, so we need to a query parameter. So question mark API key is equal to, and now we need our API key. Okay, but it will be in our process.env, and we'll call this React App Movie Key. So we need to, have that key in our .env. Okay. So in our source folder, I'm going to create a new file which I will call .env. Okay. And in here, you can see we don't want to commit this file to, GitHub. So I'm going to say git init. And in order for us to, so our node modules get grayed out, we'll just add the .env in our .gitignore so that Git would not track this file for changes. Okay. And next, I'm going to paste in the React App Movie key. And now we need the value. So the value will be coming from the movie database. Let's head over to the browser. And you can go over to settings. Sorry, you can go over to, let's see. Yeah, so to settings. And then you go over to API. And the API, you can see the URL, so an example API request, and also you can see your API key, which is what we need to authenticate ourselves to this API, to the movie database. So this is an example request and how you can, send a request. So I'm going to paste my API key here. So if you get the API key, go on to paste it there. Okay, and coming back to the IDE. Next, I'm going to return await response.json. Okay, so in the error case, we are going to give it a type of any, and in here, we are also going to return thunk API dot. We are going to call the rejected value method, and we are going to give it the error message. So with the error dot message. So this is our action. We have defined our action. Let's continue and let's define our interface for our initial movie state. So we'll say in interface movie state. Okay, this is going to be an object. We're going to have the loading state, which is going to be of type boolean. So let me correct this here. So loading is going to be of type boolean. We're also going to have an error state. Error is going to be null or is going to be a string. And we have our data. So data also is going to be null or is going to be, an array of objects where we have results. So the results key with a value of an array of any. So an array of any, I don't want to define the different types of property we are expecting in, in our object. Okay, so now we have our interface defined. Let's go on to define our initial state. So we say const initial state is going to be of type movie state, which is going to be loading of false. Also is going to be error of null, and data is going to be null because initially we don't have any of these values present in our state. Okay, now we have our initial state. We can go on to write our slice. So we're going to do this by creating a slice. So we'll call this movie slice is going to be equal to movie slice is going to be equal to create slice. Okay, create slice will take an object of configuration. We'll give it a name, and the name is going to be movies, and it also needs an initial state, which will be referencing the initial state we defined above. Now for the reducers, you see we have an empty object, and for the extra reducers, we have our builder. So now this is where it differentiates with the reducer that go on to discuss with the backend API. So an asynchronous action if I can split my screen and have our theme slice. So we can see over here in our reducer, we have our action, which is the toggle theme action. But in this case, because this is an async operation we would want to wait on, we are using the value, we are using extra reducers, okay? And with these extra reducers, it would enable us to await this, our action, to resolve before updating our state. So I'm going to close that. And in our extra reducers, I'm going to have a builder.add case. And the first case I'm going to add is it needs, the action. So getMovies.pending. So in the pending state, we need to, call a callback function to update our state. So we have our state in this action, and we also have our action. Okay, so we have our state in this callback, sorry, and in this callback function, we're not making use of the, the payload. So we're going to say state.loading is going to be true. So that's the, the only value we need to change when we are loading. So we'll add another case for the, getMovies action. So getMovies.fulfilled. So when our action resolves, the callback function is going to, have the state, and it's now also going to have our action. Okay, and our action is going to be of type payload action. Okay, so payload action, which is a generic type, and we are going to give it an object to tell it the type of result we're expecting. So we're expecting an object with a result property and an array of any. Okay, so now we're going to have that in our action, and we're going to say our state.loading is going to be false because now our promise has fulfilled, and our state.data is going to be the action.payload over here. Okay, so once this getMovies.fulfill state is automatically called for us, we are going to update our state. So loading is going to be false, and then our state.data is going to be the action.payload, and the payload is going to be returned from our response.json over here. Okay, so that's going to populate our state for us with the required values we are expecting. So moving on, we would add another case. So we'll add a case for our getMovies action, and here we're going to also get our state, and also we would get our action, okay, which is also going to be of type payload, payload action, and it's going to be any. Okay, so now in our function, we are going to update our state values. So the first, we're going to say state.loading is going to be equal to false, okay, and state.data.error is now going to be equal to our action.payload. Okay, so we're getting an error. I must have missed something. So that's state.rejected. Sorry, not state.rejected. It's our builder. So I'm going to, do that outside. So I'm going to add a case of getMovies.rejected. Okay, and I'm also going to fix the typo we have over there. So this is it, and with this done, we have our slice. So let's go on to export our reducer. So I'm going to export default movie slice dot reducer. Nice. All right, so with this done, we can, go on and call this action in our component, which is now going to return the data. So let's add it to our reducer first off. So in our reducer, I'm going to add another property, which I will call movies. Okay, and the value is going to be coming from our movie slice. So in this case, I would import and then rename it to movie reducer. okay, and also fix that at the top. So with this done, we have an error in our slice, and it's saying it's expected an assignment. So let's move over to movie slice, and I'm just going to, perhaps I must have typed this wrongly. I'm just going to I'll just clean up everything. So I'll just clean up everything and quickly rewrite it. So I'll say when it's rejected, we're going to have our state. Let me see. So our state dot error, state dot loading is going to be false, and also our state dot error is going to be action dot payload. So this is it. Let's go back to the browser and check our movies state. We have loading, error, and data there. So now let's go on to dispatch our action. So we would be dispatching this action in our app tsx. So in our use effect, we would go on to dispatch this action. So let's import use effect. So coming to the top, I'm going to import use effect from React. Okay, so in our use effect, and we are going to dispatch the action. So I'm going to have a dependency with dispatch. Okay, so let's go on to get our state, our dispatch. So const dispatch is going to be equal to use app dispatch. We are going to call it like that. So in our use effect, we want to dispatch our action. So I'm going to dispatch our get movies action. So if we go back to our movie slice, I'm going to call this get movies action that we created here. Okay, so I'm going to call the get movies and I'll call it, so let me be sure, yes, get movies, and I'm going to import it at the top. So import get movies from, and then we go up one level to our features, our movies, and then our movie slice. So let me go back to explain what's going on here. So this use effect is going to be called, we will call dispatch, and we'll dispatch get movies action. Get movies action is going to be called, and it's going to, with the builder, we have these different cases. So when it gets fulfilled, we would go on to update our states with the action.payload, and payload is coming from our response.json. So going back to our browser, okay, so if we check our extension, we have invalid API key, and this is because we added a new property in our .env, and we didn't restart our server. So whenever you change something in .env, you should always restart your server. So I'm going to go back to our terminal, and I'm going to run npm start again, and when it starts up and we go back and check our extension, we should have the movie data populated for us. Okay, so let's see, and if we check our extension, yes, we have our results, and we have the different movies that is being returned from from our API. And now we are going to take this data, we're going to map it and display the data onto our screen. Okay, so these different movies that we have would need to now display onto our screen. So going back to the IDE, okay, so I'll just close these tabs. You can move this API to a constant in case so you don't have it hard-coded, but for these purposes I would just leave it hard-coded over there. So now I'll come back to our components, and I'm going to create a component for our movie card. So I'm going to create a movie card folder. And inside the movie card folder, I'm going to move it into the components. I'm going to create a movie card.tsx file. And here, let's go on and define the JSX for our movie card. So I'm going to say const movie card is going to be, obviously be receiving some props. And we are going to return the JSX for our movie card, which is going to be a div. And in order for us to, have our props properly defined, we are going to import FC, which is for functional components from React. We are going to say movie card is going to be of type FC, and it needs, let's define the interface for the props that we are expecting. So we'll have our interface movie card props, which is going to be an object. So poster path, which would help us for the image, is going to be a string. We are also going to have our overview, so more like having a description, which is going to be of type string. And we're going to have a title, our movie title, which is going to be of type string. So we can say this component is going to be expecting movie card props. And next, we are going to destructure all this. So we'll change it to equal to. So yes, from equal to props. And we'll destructure poster path, also overview and title. Now we have this. Let's go on and impute them, configure them in our JSX. So first, I'm going to give this container a class name of max width SM. So for the maximum width, I'm going to give it a background of white, margin X auto, to center the elements horizontally. And to get auto completion, you can search for TailwindCss IntelliSense in the extension tab. So this is going to help you for auto completion. Okay. So going back to the movie card component, we'll also add rounded. So rounded LG to give it some border radius. We're going to give it border, and we're going to give the border a color. So border grade 200, and a little shadow MD. And for the dark theme, so we are going to give it a gray color of 800. And also on the dark theme, we are going to give the border a gray color of 700. And we are also going to give on the hover state, we are going to translate it Y. So we are going to move it upwards a little bit. So translate Y 4. And also on the hover state, we are going to give it a duration of 200 because of an animation. So, and on the hover state, we are also going to give it a pause animation. So when you hover over it. So this is it. And yes, so we'll have our image. So we're going to have our image tag here. And the source is going to be coming from the poster path. So poster path. And the alt will be the title. And some class names for our image. We are going to give it a class name. Rounded, we are also rounded top LG. And we are going to give it a height of 80, a full width to, to cover the container, and an object of cover. So we're also going to have a div for our title. We're going to give it a H5, and in the H5 we're going to give it a margin bottom of 2. We're also going to give the text 2XL so we can have a bigger title. We're going to have a font of bold. We are also going to have tracking tight, and we are also going to have a text gray of 900, and we are going to have for the dark theme. Okay, so let me yes, so for the dark theme, we are going to have our text color to be white. We are going to give it text white. Okay, and in our H5 we are going to display our title. And also for our overview, we are going to use a paragraph with a margin bottom of 3 and the font normal, and also a text gray of 700. And on dark theme, we are going to give it a text gray of 400. And here we would render our overview. Okay, so we have our movie card component defined. But for the overview, because the text might be long, let me slice it. So we're going to take the first 300 characters and add a ... at the end. So, for a very large text, we might not want to render all the content on the screen. So for our movie card, let's export const. So movie card, we have an error. Let's check. Okay, so sorry, we need to export default movie card. So going back to our app, let's render our movie app in our app TSX. So we are going to render our movie app component just below the header. So dynamically, we're going to first of all check if we have movies, because initially our state, but first off, let's import our movie. Yes, so we're going to check if we have movie.data. Initially it's going to be null, so we want to be sure. So if movie.data is true, we would then go on to map through it. So we say our movies.data.results, which is an array, and then we can map through it. And map is going to give us a callback function where we would have each individual property in the array. So we'll call it movie, and we need to return our movie card. So we're going to return our movie card component. Okay, so go on and import movie card from components, movie card, and it needs some properties. So I'm going to destructure some properties from movie. So I'll destructure ID, and also I will destructure title, and I'll destructure overview. And also I'm going to destructure poster path. Okay, so coming back to the browser, in case you're not sure, you can see that in the results we have our ID, we have title, we have overview, we have poster path, and we also have some other information. But in this case, we would not be displaying all those data. Going back to the IDE, so I'm going to, first off, give it a key, which is going to be the ID, and we're going to pass the title, which is equal to title. We are going to pass the overview, which is going to be equal to overview, and we're going to pass the poster path, which is going to be equal to poster path. So if we save and we go back to our browser, yes, we see our movie displayed on the screen, but our image is broken. So fixing that, we will concatenate this URL to the poster path. So https, we are going to go to image.tmdb, so the movie database.org, and then /t/p/original, and then we are going to add the movie path. So this is going to give us the images, and we have our images displayed on the screen. So we don't want to display them like this. We want to display them in grid. You can see our theming is also functioning. So coming back to the IDE, let's display our movies as a grid. So I'm going to wrap them in another div item. This div, I'm going to give it a class name. So a class name of grid, which is going to display the elements as grid. And so grid call 1. So this is the normal grid. It's just going to be one column. On medium devices, we are going to have grid call 2, and on larger devices, we are going to have grid call 3, and we are going to give it a gap of 5, and also some margin bottom of 10. Okay, so let's go back to the browser, and we see our movies displayed on the screen. Okay, and we can also go on to, over there we see our animation that is playing on the screen. So let's go back to the IDE. Yes, so next we are going to go on to implement our search functionality. So I'm going to create a new component which I'll call search. So search box, and then I'm going to create a searchbox.tsx file. So inside the searchbox.tsx, let's define the JSX for our search box. We're going to have a const search box, which is going to be equal to an arrow function, and this is going to return an input. Yes, so we'll return an input, and this input is going to be of type search. So it's going to be of type search. Okay, and also it's going to have a class name and a placeholder. So for the placeholder, we'll just go with search ... And for the class names, we are going to, display it as a block and give it a padding of 4, a padding left of 10, and then focus states, we are going to give outline none. We're also going to give the text SM, and let's see, we're also going to give it a text gray color of 900. Okay, and we are going to give it a background of gray 50. We're going to give it rounded LG, and also a border, and let's see, and the border gray of 300. And on focus state, we're going to give the border about a blue border, so border blue 500. And on the dark theme, we're going to give it a background gray 700. And also on the dark theme, we are going to give it a border gray of 600. And also on the dark theme, we are going to give it a, let's see, the placeholder is going to have a text color. So placeholder is going to have, let's see, yep, a color of 400. And on that theme, we're going to give the text white. So this is our JSX. Let's go on and export default search box. So this is our search component, and we are going to render it in our app.tsx. So I will just I'll just place it beneath the header. We are going to display our search box component inside a div, and this div will just display our search box, and we would save. Okay, let's give it some distance to the movie, so we'll give it a margin bottom of 12. We're also going to give it flex, and we are going to give it items center and justify between. So let's save, and let's see what we have on our browser. So here we have our search box, and we have our theme. Okay, so obviously it's not functional yet, and in order for us to search through our movies, there's something we should keep in mind, because each movie that we render, not all movies have a title. Okay, so some movies do have title, while some others, as you see, this has a title and this don't have any title. So these are things we need to keep in mind so our application won't crash. Okay, but coming back to the IDE, we need to have an unchange function that is going to be called when the user types into our input. And continue with this, let's see. First, I'm going to import useState in app.tsx so that we can have our search term. So we'll have our useState, and let's have a state that we'll call search term. So const is equal to useState, which is going to have initial value of an empty string. Okay, so we are going to call this search term, and set search term. Okay, and we will be passing this over as props to our search box component. Okay, so let's go over to our search box component, and we'll be passing this set search term as props. So let me see, I'll just copy it. So this is going to be equal to set search term. Now we are getting the error because we have not defined the props for our search term. And let's do that by defining an interface, which we'll call search box props. Yep, this is going to be an object, and we're going to have our set search term, which is going to be of type dispatch. Dispatch needs to be imported from React, and it's a generic type, so we can say we're going to dispatch a type of React dot set state action, and it's a generic type. It wants to know the type of action that is going to be returned, going to be a string. So we can remove the React and just import set state action from React, and also remove that over there. Also we need to import fc functional component so that we can define our props. Not there, so we would go over to the search box component. So this is going to be of type fc, and it's going to be type search box props. We would receive the props from the function, and we would destructure. So we'll say const object is going to be equal to props, and we'll be destructuring set search term. So we're going to return unchanged. We'll call the function with our event, and we'll call set search term, which is going to take the event.target.value, which holds the input that the user typed. But let's go to the browser, and the user can type into the search box and have some white space, which we don't want. The user can also type in uppercase and in lowercase, so we need to strip off the white space, and we also need to convert from uppercase to lowercase, and we also need to keep track of some movies without a title. Going back to the IDE, what we are going to do, we are going to trim. So we are going to set it to the trim value, which will remove the excess white space from the beginning and the end, and we'll convert it to lowercase as well. So this is it, and coming over to our app.tsx, now we have our set term, which is going to be set whenever the user types into the input. Okay, so what we're going to do is now to filter through the movies, and we are going to do this by having a function. So we have a function called search movies, which is going to be equal to movies.data, and we might not have data, so we'll use the optional chaining. If it's available, then we'll go through the results, and we will need to filter. And filter is going to, take in a condition to know what is going to be returned from each element in the array. So we'll call it movie. And first we need to, um, check if we have an empty string. So in case we have an empty string, we don't want to, filter. We'll just go on to return the movie. So we can do that by saying if search them, search them dot length. So if there is no search them dot length, we will just go on and return each movie. Okay, and that's one. And also we need to check if we have the title. So we can do that by saying if there is no movie dot title, we will just return. That means these movies will not be part of our search, so that we don't search for undefined. Okay, so if there's no title, just go ahead and return, don't continue. And if all these cases pass, then we have a search term and we have a title. So we're going to return the movie title, we'll convert it to lowercase, and we'll check if it includes our search term. So we're going to return all movies that includes our search term. So that's our first check. So if there's no length, return movie. And if it also passes the second check, go on and return the movie. And this is going to return an array of elements that matches the condition. So we'll pass the search movies into, we will no longer be using movie.data. We would map through our search movies. And also there. Okay, so let's go back to our browser. And if I reload the page, and let's try to search. So if I search for a movie with H, we see our movie, okay, HOC, and it has to include the search term. And if I just type, let's say THOR to HOR, you see we have that movie. It must not be the complete word. And so TR returns the movie. So the search functionality is working. And so that's it, guys. So we have seen how to implement theming. We have also seen how to implement search functionality, how to use Redux to store asynchronous actions, and also normal functions that don't discuss with the database. So if you like this type of content, help the channel and subscribe. I would see you guys some other time. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.